Good morning and welcome to the January 31st, 2024 Transportation Infrastructure and Planning Subcommittee. I call the meeting to order at 10:01. So our first order of business is to hear from the city attorney, and he'll explain public comment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members of the public may speak for up to 2 minutes to comment on agenda items to be discussed. Comments must be related to the agenda item and the action being considered by the subcommittee. The City Council and staff cannot discuss or comment on matters relating to pending investigations, claims, or litigation. Members of the public who are registered lobbyists with the City of Phoenix must disclose this fact before addressing members of the subcommittee.
Thank you. And now I'd like to introduce the interpreter who usually sits downstairs.
Good morning. Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Elsie Duarte, and I will be servicing as Spanish interpreter for today's Transportation, Infrastructure, and Planning Subcommittee session. I will now take a moment to introduce myself to our Spanish-speaking audience and review some guidelines. Buenos días. La sesión Bienvenidos a la sesión de hoy de Subcomisión de Transportación, Infraestructura y Planificación. Mi nombre es Elsie Duarte y estaré sirviéndoles hoy como intérprete a nuestra audiencia de habla hispana. Deseamos pedirles antemano si va a dar un comentario público, por favor hable despacio, con claridad y evite tener distracciones de fondo. Finalmente, pause después de cada una o dos oraciones para poder interpretar lo que esté diciendo de la manera más completa posible. Gracias. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Our first item of business is approval of the minutes of the November 15th, 2023 meeting. Do I have a motion or any comments?
So moved. Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Next, we have our consent agenda items 2 through 6, and I believe, Councilwoman Pastor, you had some questions on item 3 and 6, so why don't we take those separately? So can I get a motion on the consent items 2, 4, and 5?
So moved. Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
It passes unanimously. So, Councilwoman Pastor, do you still have questions on item 3? Okay. Roxanne Favors has joined us.
Item 3 is about the concessions, am I correct? Yes. Okay, because I'm reading some future agenda, and I'm like, taxi contracts. If you could please just remind me regarding this program and the purpose.
Certainly. Thank you, Vice Chair, Madam Vice Mayor, Chair, and Member Pastor. This concession consulting contract is where we have an on-call service that we seek out more expertise regarding concession programs nationwide to make sure that we have a best-in-class concessions program. So with this particular contract, we split it up into 2 scopes of work. One focusing on concession programming to make sure that with all the exciting new airports opening concessions programs that we're staying up to date on trends of what passengers are looking for, whether it's entertainment, retail, or more passenger amenity services. And so they help us program that in our existing terminal space and any future concourse spaces that will be opening. The second portion of the scope of work is to help us with the financial analysis. As concessions go through requests for reconcepting and they bring us a new concept, the other consultant will go through their pro forma to make sure that it's financially viable. They'll also kind of stress test it against what our passenger feedback has been on this type of service in our airport. So we want to make sure that we're offering the right services and amenities for what we're hearing from our passengers. So we broke the scope of work up into 2 areas so that we have 2 contracts coming forward for this program.
Okay, the reason why I pulled the item and wanted to know was because I was asked why the concession stands and the concessionaires, what was the purpose really of this? And how do they come into play?
Certainly. So when we put out new concession opportunities, these two consultant groups helps us with that. One, with what the concepts that we're looking for, and the second one with verifying those that propose on those units, their financial capabilities. Will they be profitable? Will this meet with what we intend as far as our program? For the concessionaires, our current ones, where this entities will come into play is in the reconcepting. We ask any of our concessionaires that want to change over a concept location that's currently under contract to provide us what they expect to be their gross sales and their future revenue, and then we ask the consultant to take a look at that to just verify, does that make sense? Are we going to be asked again to do another reconcept because that concept wasn't successful financially for the individual? So that's where that comes into play. So they are to give us guidance. They're not there to select or determine who gets the opportunities. They're there mostly for their professional technical guidance for the staff.
So basically, we are doing our due diligence by hiring these contractors to help us with the financial piece and making sure that our airport is vibrant and we have the right concepts to meet the needs of our customers, and then also be able to see if we're maximizing the best use of our airport and space for concession areas.
That's
Okay.
correct,
All
Councilwoman
right.
Pastor.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Are there any other comments? Okay, may I get a motion?
Move to approve item 3. Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Carries unanimously. Item 6, approval of historic preservation exterior rehab grants. I believe, Councilwoman Pastor, you had a couple questions on that as well.
I actually just wanted to make comments, but you're more
I-
than. I just wanted to thank the department for the grants. It's important. I don't even know the exact percentage, but I know it's 85% of the historic districts and historic area, and understand the value of preserving history while we modernize. So I just wanted to thank the group and recognize them for doing it. So thank you.
I appreciate that. And with that, would you like to make the motion since you have 85% of the historic districts in your?
And I move item number 6.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. It passes unanimously. Next on our agenda is shared micromobility. And this is an update on our program and a discussion of planned potential expansion. And we are joined by Joe Brown, our new Street Transportation Director. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. This morning, we're here to provide an update on the shared micromobility program. As you stated, the city replaced the downtown shared electric scooter pilot program with the current program in January of 2023. At the September TIP, subcommittee staff provided a 6-month update on the program, and the subcommittee directed staff to evaluate expanding micromobility citywide. Staff is here today to provide an overview of the data we've collected so far and outline the upcoming efforts, and then also get direction from the subcommittee to develop a plan to look at expanding potentially citywide. I have with me Joe Brown, as you mentioned, the new Streets Director, and Brianna Velez, the Assistant Director, also on the phone for any questions should the subcommittee desire. Our representatives from Spin and Lime are 2 vendors in this particular item. For here this morning, we have broken up the presentation into a discussion of the existing program, and then looking at some of the data collection potential updates, as well as a potential for a 24-hour pilot usage program that you heard about in September from some of the vendors, and then move into the draft micromobility plan and public outreach, where we'll lay out how we're going to approach getting public input and looking at citywide expansion of that. And with that, I will turn over to Brianna, who's going to walk us through the existing program. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. Good morning, Madam Chair and members of this subcommittee. So this map represents the current boundary of the micromobility program. The box in yellow represents our downtown core area, and the light blue area represents along the light rail alignment, both to the east and south of downtown Phoenix. So some of the current program parameters include a maximum fleet of 1,500 vehicles per vendor. 15% of that fleet needs to be deployed in equity zones, and staff has identified 11 equity zones within the current operating boundary. And 20% of the fleet deployed should be traditional or electric bikes. So there has been a lot of overall growth in ridership since the program kicked off in January 2023. And this program has really been supporting, particularly in our downtown Phoenix area, special events like Super Bowl, First Fridays, when we have concerts, as well as day-to-day transportation needs for residents in Phoenix. Overall, there has been a total of approximately 338,000 trips from the beginning through November 30th of 2023. You'll see here that there was a gradual decrease during the summer months, most likely due to heat, but then once the temperature cooled off, we saw that ridership come back and increase. On average, there's been about 1,200 micromobility vehicles available within the program boundaries. And again, the policy does allow each vendor to provide up to 1,500 vehicles for a maximum of 3,000 vehicles in the overall program. So one of the key metrics for evaluating the performance of a shared micromobility system is really the number of trips per vehicle per day. And this is also referred to as the utilization rate. Utilization rates for the micromobility program through November 30th of 2023 is 0.87. And so when we look at this nationwide, we're looking at a utilization rate of 1.5. So that's kind of where our target should be. When we break the utilization rate down by vehicle type, electric scooter utilization rate is 0.91 and electric bike utilization rate is 0.33. So what we're seeing is a higher demand and usage for the electric scooters versus the electric bikes. So in September, the TIP subcommittee asked staff to create a plan to assess program updates, which includes additional vendors, traditional bike availability, as well as 24/7 operating hours. So currently, Phoenix's program has 2 micromobility vendors, which really meets industry best practices for the size of our market. And in May of 2023, vendors Lime, Spin, Super Pedestrian, and Bird publicly praised Phoenix for having the appropriate number of vendors within our market. We have most recently seen consolidation or restructuring within the industry, as well as some vendors going out of business completely. So both vendors have committed to providing traditional bikes through a library system, which allows users to check out bikes for a longer period of time at no cost. So Spin has launched their traditional bike library system in fall of 2023. Rentals are available 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. and are dropped off at the requested location. Again, they are free of charge and reservations are required. Lime will be also offering traditional bikes through a library system beginning next month in February 2024. It'll allow for 24-hour rentals dropped off at the requested location, and reservations are also required. All the deliveries must be within the current operating program boundaries. So the 2022 Shared Micromobility State of the Industry Report did note that electric bikes are ridden 56% more than pedal bikes in systems that have both options available. And so this trend has really been reflected in cities such as Minneapolis and Houston, which have really struggled to maintain and operate their bike share. It's really due to operational costs and increased alternative modes like electric scooters. The established bike share programs were originally funded by subsidies and grants, and both bike share programs have been discontinued in those cities. The current operating hours for our micromobility program are 5 a.m. to 11:59 p.m., and this really was selected to reduce the potential for impaired driving. The vendors have requested to provide 24/7 service, and it's really to hopefully increase utilization within the program. The vendors have stated that they can issue sobriety tests through their apps, and here are some examples of what those look like for both Lime and Spin. I'm now going to turn the presentation over to Joe Brown, who will take us through the remainder.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the subcommittee. This has been a great opportunity for me coming in cold to this micromobility program to look at it from a fresh set of eyes. So what I'm going to detail are basically what we're doing going forward for the coming year, what the things we're going to be looking at, what we think could be changed relatively quickly, and what will take perhaps longer. So that beginning with a peer city review. So based on demographics and size of city, our peer cities are San Diego, Seattle, and Austin. Our staff, our micromobility and active transportation staff met with staff from those three cities and their departments. They all have higher user rates than we do, a little bit over 1. Ours is just, as Brianna mentioned, just under 1. They all have 24/7 operation, with the exception of San Diego that has a 2-hour limit. So here's what we're looking at going forward. Is it possible to do expansion, and what are the factors impacting that expansion? What's going to be our micromobility plan going forward? And one of the important factors is community engagement, in which we plan to step up in the coming year. As Brianna mentioned, this is the boundary of the program, which is important because the next few slides show a series of other factors that influence ridership and usage in the program. This is our bike infrastructure in Phoenix. As you can see, that's one of the factors, of course, that impacts usership. These are the heaviest utilized routes, bus routes, in purple, and the light rail in green. Also increased ridership near those connections. This is the percentage of households that have 0 or 1 vehicle. I currently live in 4 blocks from here, and I'm one of those people with just one household with just 1 vehicle. That's also a factor in usage in the program. These are the equity zones, and many of you had asked about the equity zones as we were preparing this presentation. To put this into perspective, where you see the word Phoenix, that's where we are, closer to the P, and that's Jefferson and Washington. And then those equity zones, 4, 5, and 6, have more than 40% of the ridership. The other equity zones, the ridership is much lower.
Could you repeat that, please?
Yes. So to put this into perspective, we are where the word Phoenix is. South of us is one of the equity zones, and these are the equity zones. There's an equation that we use to come up with these equity zones. However, the starred equity zones, 4, 5, and 6 on the slide, they have more than 40% of the ridership. The other equity zones have much lower ridership. This was an interesting slide from both of our vendors, Spin and Lime, who are both have called in remotely. And as Alan mentioned, Britt Muller, who's the head of policy and communications with Spin, is on, and Charlie Mastellani, senior manager government relations in the Southwest with Lime, are both on. But this is data from their app hits, and you can see where the majority of the app hits are coming from. The northern part of the zone, a few people at the airport that probably traveling downtown and want to know if they can use micromobility, and also there's higher usage along Metro. So this is some of the outreach that we've done already. A virtual public meeting in October, a citywide survey in the fall as well. And we are available to do micromobility presentations, not just the one we did at D4 in November, but going forward in other districts if you have a specific meeting that you would like us to attend. These are the responses we had, 309 survey responses, and pretty self-explanatory. We had a lot of responses, you know, sort of at the extreme edges of Phoenix as well, and also some of the suburbs, which are in these results. There's that level of response that I'm mentioning. You can see some of the shaded areas beyond the city limits that had some responses as well. What it told us is there's a greater demand in Midtown, Uptown, and surrounding areas. 193 provided zip codes. Of those 193, 114 were interested, 79 people opposed the program. I mentioned many responses outside of Phoenix. So these are some other questions, just to highlight a couple questions that were asked in the survey. Micromobility vehicles should be available 24 hours a day to rent. 44% agreed, 43% disagreed. Whether we should consider riding on a sidewalk if a bike lane is not available, if we should allow that. 46% agreed, and 37% disagreed from the survey respondents. Tabling events are very effective for us. We've done them at First Friday and some other events, and for any council members that want us to attend any specific events and set up a table, those are pretty effective ways to get the word out about the program and to gauge interest. Of course, English and Spanish will be available at those events. And neighborhood leadership meetings, you know, if there's anyone in particular or associated with a specific project that we're presenting at, we'd be glad to talk about it as well. Going forward, looking at the corral assessment, the locations that we have it, it's given us an opportunity to really take a deep dive into the program and look at everything and what's working and what's not. Also, we're somewhat limited by our vendor staffing and availability. They are on the phone if you want to ask them a question regarding any of these issues. There's been a drop-off of the number of national vendors. We're down to really 2 big national vendors now, and we're using both of them. So there's some concern about expanding too much that would put an unfair burden on them. So our next steps, we're going to take a closer look at traditional and e-bikes, what we can do to increase those numbers, exploring pedal bike options, working with downtown Phoenix and some other groups. The convention center has a big interest in expanding traditional bikes, so we are looking to partner with them to see what we can do to provide more, not just a library system of traditional bikes, but perhaps a docking or a dockless system. 24-hour operation, it seems that everybody is supporting this, downtown businesses, downtown Phoenix, as well as the vendors are in big support of this, as Brianna mentioned. That perhaps can be the first change that we incorporate going forward. We want to broaden the community outreach, finalize the mobility plan and determine if any expansion is wise. A closer look at the number of operating vendors and vehicles that are available. Explore sidewalk riding with the electric scooters and bikes, and if that's something we want to do for safety purposes and on certain roads, that's something else that we want to look at. And explore, you know, the bike program, as I mentioned, in general. Most importantly, we want to know what you have to say and what your advice is going forward. I think it's a program that appears to be working. Not having been involved in setting it up and seeing how it operates, we'd like to keep it that way and see what we can do to perhaps do some wise expansion. That said, do you have any questions for us or the vendors?
Thank you. We actually have some speakers. Should we take them first before question? Okay, great. Richard Hawk, I hope I'm not mispronouncing your name. I apologize in advance if I have.
Hello, council members and members of the subcommittee. Thank you for your time today. My name is Richard Houck. I use they, them pronouns. I'm a resident of the Central City Village, and I live in Equity Zone 1. I use a traditional bicycle as my main mode of transit to get throughout the city. I need to clarify that I am opposed with stipulations. I'm not completely opposed. We do need micromobility throughout our city. When the micromobility program was launched in January of 2023, my neighborhood was included in the program. Since then, the scooters have been a nuisance. People ditch them wherever in my neighborhood, blocking sidewalks and contributing a blighted look. I have reported these instances throughout the past year. I have noticed trash left by riders, people riding on the sidewalks, and not respecting the residents of my community. This is going to be a continued nuisance if this program is continued in its current form. Stickers were recently placed on the sidewalks for micromobility parking. The issue with these stickers is that they were placed in areas that aren't conducive for the flow of people, especially the ones who live here. They are placed in areas that will make it more dangerous for pedestrians and other micromobility users. Most of the people using the program come from outside of my community. My concern is that when expanding the program, there must be strictly enforced parking corrals placed in areas where the surrounding community designates as the best location. My suggestion is to place these corrals next to bus stops and local businesses where a trash and recycle bin is present. We do not need the mess and problem that Tempe has with scooters and bikes here in Phoenix. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker, Patrick McDaniel.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. For the record, my name is Patrick McDaniel. I'm speaking today as Director of Advocacy for Phoenix Community Alliance. On behalf of our Board of Directors, our over 300 members, and especially our Multimodal Connectivity Committee. The Micromobility Program is something we've been deeply invested in as we help pilot this program and launch it in 2023. First, I would really like to thank city staff for preparing the report and recommendations. I know this has been quite the process that's gone on over many months, many iterations, so once again, your work is very much appreciated. There are many positive aspects in this report. PCA, we fully support the expansion into Midtown and Uptown and transit-adjacent areas, as these are opportunities for to alternative modes of transit. We support the increased hours of operation. And speaking with micromobility operators or managers in peer cities, the apps and other tools that providers use to prohibit impaired drivers definitely work, so we definitely support that as well. We also encourage a thoughtful, deliberate process in the rollout of potential further expansion as the UR rates increase or as the number of residents, the operating area increases. Our request is that providers report back periodically and regularly to provide updates on these programs. However, there are some concerning aspects to this report. Operators have requested to increase operations in equity zones. We find that concerning. Spin, they've just launched their checkout system is only available through the City of Phoenix micromobility page. There's really no clear and ready access to that. Who's going to go to one page to make a reservation? It does not seem like it's very well publicized. Lime, we're glad to see that they will be rolling these out soon. So once again, we appreciate all the hard work that's gone into the potential expansion, and we just ask that deliberate, thoughtful process is included in further expansion. And Director Brown mentioned potential DPI. Please consider Downtown Phoenix Inc., Phoenix Community Alliance, a resource in trying to launch more pedal bikes throughout the area. Thank you.
Do you have a question, Councilwoman?
I do. Yeah. Sir, you said one of the concerning items was an increase in operations in equity zone. Did I hear that correctly, or
No, a decrease.
a decrease?
Correct.
Thank you for
Yes.
clarifying. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Charlie Mastaloni. Yes, he's online.
Hi, City Council. I'm just here to answer any questions you might have, and I just really want to say I appreciate the thought that I know the program managers have put into everything, the presentation, and we're excited to continue to work with them to see what we can do to continue to make mobility work in Phoenix. So happy to take any questions later on, and thank you.
Thank you. And last speaker is Britt Moeller. He's online as well.
Hi, thank you for the invitation to speak. Similar to Charlie, I'm here to answer any questions. I represent SPIN as their head of public policy. I want to thank city staff for their thoughtful report and look forward to continue working with the city to strengthen the mobility program going forward. Thank you.
That is all the speakers we have. Are there any questions from council?
Yes, ma'am.
Committee, rather.
That's right. We knew what you meant.
Okay, we'll start with Councilwoman Hodge Washington.
Thank you, Chair. I have a couple of questions. It's kind of like in no particular order, so I'm going to bounce around, I'll admit that. The utilization rate that we currently have in comparison to the national average is significantly lower, in my opinion. It's lower. Is it based primarily on the 24/7 availability of the other programs?
Councilwoman, I think there's a lot of factors involved in that. One is our population density is less than many of those cities that we're being compared to, although we rated fairly well on a lot of other metrics. That's one of the issues. I think there's things we can do to improve it that I mentioned before. Some of those other factors, there were, I think, 3 slides in a row that mentioned some of those other factors that influence that. I think what many people have mentioned is there can be a better direct link to mass transit as well.
Okay. And then the other question I had, I have a couple. So I noticed we saw a decline in usage during the hotter days. Is there any suggestions on how we could make the apparatuses more user-friendly during those time periods?
That's a good question. We'll go back and look at that, Councilwoman. Not having lived through the summer yet, I just have heard about it. So, and how extremely hot it was last summer and record-setting. We're hoping this summer is not like that, but we will go back and look at what we can do to keep those numbers a little higher during the summer.
And go ahead.
Madam Chair, Councilwoman Hodge Washington, having lived through many summers here, I can tell you that it's harder to certainly do in the summer, but I do think that we have the vendors on here that might have some suggestions what they have done in other cities to address this, as they are in some cities that get a little bit warmer as well. So maybe there's some ideas they have there. If you'd like to ask them today, if not, we can certainly explore that with them as we continue on the effort within this area. Excuse me.
I'll put them on the spot quickly if they have some ideas on how we can do that. Otherwise, they're free to collaborate with city staff in making sure that we account for that time period. So I don't know if they have any, Brent or Charlie has anything they want to add regarding those items?
Thank you. Anyone else have any questions?
Oh, I wasn't finished.
I'm
Sorry,
I
it's okay. And the other question I had is, also one of the comments that was made, I've heard also, is sometimes the scooters are a nuisance or sometimes they come up as a blight issue. What can we do to ensure that as we expand the program, we are making sure that they are being returned in a manner that's safe and conducive for not only the other users, for fellow pedestrians and residents of Phoenix?
Madam Chair and Councilwoman Hodge Washington, that's something that we've talked about. I've noticed, some of our peer cities like San Diego have very strong rules that they post online. I think there's things that we can strengthen in that regard, and we've discussed signage. That's not cheap, but perhaps some signage could be added additionally to keep those numbers down. I walk to and from here four blocks, from where I live, so I've experienced some of that. I'll say it's worse with my experience is it's worse with the people who have their own scooters that are also doing it. So something we have to look at in a broader context, I think, as well.
And then my last point, just to echo the comment of our second public speaker, is we definitely want to make sure that the checkout process is conducive and easy for the public. I personally think a 24-hour rental procedure seems could be viewed as counterproductive if we want people to use the micromobility more on the fly. So I don't know if there's some way we can revamp that a little bit so they don't have to necessarily provide 24 hours to reserve a bicycle. So those are my comments, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, Councilwoman O'Brien.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. First, I want to talk a little bit or ask about when they're left where they're not supposed to be. Is it Charlie or Brent? Are they on the line? Can one of them answer what they're supposed to do and what they do?
Yeah, Councilwoman, this is Brent Muller from SPIN. Thanks for your question. When a device is misparked and we get a complaint or a notice from a member of the public, we take the responsibility to relocate the device. We strive for a 1.5 hour response time on average. Hopefully it's quicker than that, but just given the size of the city, sometimes it takes a bit longer to relocate that device. But we hold ourselves accountable. We want to keep the public right of way clear and safe for pedestrians. And so generally most of those devices are relocated to an approved corral or locked in an approved location within about an hour and a half on average.
And so are you able to provide us with data that shows how many calls you get and how quickly you're able to return them or handle them? Do you do that?
Yeah, we do that. We provide a monthly data report to city staff. And I think one of the metrics includes the number of public reports or parking relocation requests.
So do those complaints come straight to you? Or do they go through the city?
That's a good question. Some of the complaints come directly to us. If they reach out to our customer service team or through email, they also, members of the public will also directly contact the city. And in those instances, city staff will reach out to us, provide us with the location of the device, and ask that we relocate it immediately. As a practice, we provide them with photo confirmation that we've moved the device. Again, generally within around an hour on average.
Okay, thank you so much for that information. So I think part of the problem, I'm going to be honest, if I was walking in a community and an e-scooter was in my way, I wouldn't begin to know where to start if I were 10 years ago, if this were the case and I were walking my kids to school. So I think that there's probably an opportunity for an information campaign or some kind of education so that folks know how to report these. I know that, Joe, you were talking about walking to and from work, and so that's, if you're trying to walk around scooters, not much fun. I would think we want to make sure we do that. I am pro micromobility, but I also want to make sure we're respectful of our community members, that they have the ability to walk or recreate, rollerblade. I know it's been a long time. I just dated myself, very much so, on their sidewalks if necessary. So if we could have some recommendations on how we might do that, that would be great. I think it's also important I'd like to see the data you guys are provided from the vendors related to how many complaints are coming in and how they're responded to. And if we're not receiving that, I would hope we would include that in future contracts, I'd like to talk a little bit about the equity zones and how, I know we have 11 of them, and how are those determined again?
Madam Chair, Councilwoman O'Brien, there are 5 factors that go into that, and it's a bit of a complicated equation, but it includes percentage of households below the poverty line, median household income, percentage of no vehicle households, percentage of households paying more than 30% of their income on housing, and percentage of people of color.
And is all of that information come from the census? Where does that information come from?
Yes, from the census.
Oh, okay. And did you compute utilization rates for each equity zone?
Yes, we did. Have them. I mean, memory serves, they were very low outside of those 3 areas. Those 3 areas, the 4, 5, and 6 on the slide, which are closer to downtown, had over 40%. The others were around 1%, even lower than 1%.
So 4, 5,
Total
and
ridership.
6 had 40% ridership, but how does that equate to the utilization rate? Right, is 40% ridership is not the same as utilization rate, is that correct?
Well, you could do the math. I mean, it's 40% of our total, our total number. So that utilization rates are probably much higher in those districts than the average that we have. They're all based on census tract areas. The other 7 in the program, I guess 7 or 8 in the program, had, the numbers I had were like 1%, even less than 1% at times.
So
of
what's
the total usage. So their user rates would be much lower.
So do you have an exact utilization rate for each of them?
No, what we have is the percentage of total use in the program.
So all 8, so 8 of them are at 1% or lower. Is that what I hear you saying?
Councilwoman, roughly, yes, that's correct.
And 4, 5, and 6 are at about 40%.
Yeah, a little more than 40%. If I recall, it was 42%.
So if we're doing the math, then 8 of our zones would significantly decrease our overall utilization rate. Is that correct?
Councilwoman, I think that's fair to say.
Okay. And we require them to have how much of their current fleet deployed in equity zones?
It's not a requirement, but the goal is 15%.
All right. That's all for now, Chair.
Dora?
I'm going to give a little history for those that weren't here for history. Micromobility, we passed it finally in 2023, but micromobility had been in front of us at least a good 2 years to discuss it and bring it to the city. We had some vibrant conversations about it. In particular, we wanted to bring it downtown because of all the events that were happening, Super Bowl, now Final Four, but there were a lot of pieces moving within downtown, and downtown had requested it. So we said, okay, we'll test it. All the same concerns that everybody has stated are still the same concerns as before we even rolled it out in 2023. We wrote, I believe, Mario, is it an ordinance? I don't know that all the different terms, a policy, whatever. We wrote an ordinance very specifically to micromobility. And it was very specific to the fact that micromobility would happen on the streets because of the way our sidewalks are designed and how lack of responsibility, really, in the rider of not being aware of those others that are on the streets and pedestrians. So we were very clear and very specific about how we were going to roll it out and what that was going to look like. We talked heavily about enforcement. We talked with DPI on enforcement and things like that. And we probably should revisit that and see what we can do in enforcement. We talked very clearly, the RFP is very written, clear about the rules and about what the vendors need to do and how they need to educate the community. We did best practices. We learned from San Diego and others to be able to write what we needed to do in order for this to be successful. Then there was a push, and in that RFP, because I pulled the RFP and read parts of it, but I read particularly the traditional bikes. And I remember fighting or advocating at that time the traditional bikes, because we wanted traditional bikes and we wanted it to happen. It is in the RFP. It does talk about electric bikes, but we specifically put traditional bikes. Like any RFP, we roll it out, people bite, they come back, and then in behind the scenes, when the contract is written, that's where really the negotiation happens as to what the vendors can do. So the vendors really didn't want to do traditional bikes. Then we came up with this library system that doesn't work and is archaic, and we don't have any information on traditional bikes to be able to decide if we get rid of the traditional bikes or we build a library. We allow the vendors to tell us, as we are the customers and we are the client, we allow the vendors to tell us what we want. So I'm a little frustrated, if you can hear my voice, of how this piece has come about and the fact that now we're talking about expansion. If we can't get it right the first time, I don't think we expand until we get it right. The expansion wants to go into District 4. The reason why they want to go in District 4, because now we're talking about equity zones and how there's not a lot of ridership, and how the fact that we don't want to provide these micromobility systems in equity zones because we're not making money. Let's just be plain and simple. We're a capitalist country. We want to make money. Is that right? I don't know. It depends on who you're debating. But in equity zones, there should be an opportunity to have the same thing that are in the zones that make money. So somehow, some way, we're going to have that discussion. And District 4 has the ability, which I represent, has the ability and the density that they want in order to make that money. The reason why I am stating that is because if we're going to roll out in District 4 and any other districts, then the current plan needs to get solid and be able to work before we roll out into other districts. Because the pickup of these scooters, bikes, and everything, the 1.5 hour pickup does not happen. In my zone, where there is no zone, I have bikes sitting there for days. I have scooters sitting there for days. I have I see people pulling the scooters down just to use it as metal, the same way they would do a traditional bike. So our system is broken. And so it's not completely broken, but we need to fix the parts that are broken in order for it to roll out, in order for us to have a very clean and operating micromobility system. And so what I have are several directives, and I don't know if I need to make it into a motion. That's what I need to know. I will just read what I have, and then we can.
Okay, why don't you do that?
So I move to continue the micromobility program and expand it to a 2-mile radius around the current light rail system, provided that, number 1, an intensive and robust community outreach and engagement is conducted, which is a minimum will include at 3 in-person community meetings in each of the council districts affected. A third vendor that specializes in traditional pedal bikes is selected through a separate RFP process, releasing the 2 current vendors from this requirement and not utilizing a library system. Research and further study are done to explore further expansion to the Biltmore region. And the expansion, and our colleagues can talk about this, the expansion of additional hours will be to 3 a.m. in the morning. Will not be 24/7, or at least that's what I'm putting here. And this plan to really be created and brought back in September and really worked on for the community and with the community. Those are my statements, those are my directives or motion. So you can add if you want.
Madam Chair.
Chairwoman, oh.
If I may, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, this item is actually not posted for action, it's posted for information and discussion, but staff is requesting input from each of you, so I think they've
So then these are directives.
taken that input, yes.
Chair?
Yes.
Could I have could I have Councilwoman Pastor repeat bullet number 2, the one after 3 in-person meetings in the districts? The next one, yeah.
Okay. A third vendor, I'll give you a third vendor that specializes in traditional pedal bikes is selected through a separate RFP process, releasing the 2 current vendors from this requirement. And that it would be, we would not be utilizing a library system.
Thank you, ma'am.
I had a question for clarification as well. I wrote a 2-mile radius around the light rail, expanded a 2-mile radius around the light rail system. So are you taking away from, I want to make sure you're including the new light rail provisions that we just opened on the Northwest Extension and how that interplays with the current zone. Is that what you're intending?
Yes. What we in addition to.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, in addition to. And to keep the equity zones.
That was my second question.
So I guess that would be more in the way of a direction. Now, I have one comment, and I'm glad that we've looked at other big cities, but have we really talked to like Scottsdale about their program? They're much more similar to us as a city when it comes to density, and I think we need to expand and talk to cities that are more similar to us as far as micromobility. I have a hard time comparing us to Chicago and New York City. I know we're a big city, but we're not exactly like those 2 cities. So in our research, as we expand and look, I'd like to have a little bit more. And then as far as the 24/7, I personally, I don't have a problem with that. I don't know what the difference between 2 and having it 24/7, but perhaps you could look into that again with some of our surrounding communities. And I know in Scottsdale, they do allow them to ride on sidewalks. I think there's certain provisions for it. I'm not sure, but I do see a lot of scooters and bikes in the sidewalks, and I think they allow it. I don't think people are doing that illegally, but there's some precedent for allowing that. And then as far as the meetings, I only have a small portion go through my district, so I'm not sure if 3 meetings is really adequate.
I guess the council person has the ability to say if I want 1, 2, or 3.
Yeah.
But what normally happens with staff, and the reason why I put 3 is because they can hide behind, oh, we had 1 meeting and 2 people show up. Then hide behind, we had a virtual meeting and 1 person shows up or nobody knows.
Maybe instead of number of meetings, might we suggest that they have feedback with a minimum, I don't know what your number of people would be, but I mean, that's kind of hard. You can't make people attend a meeting on one hand, but I get your point there.
And can I add one more thing
Yeah.
to, I guess we're calling it a directive, is that I think it would be important to talk to the folks that are developing Metro Center and Paradise Valley and areas like that to see if they've researched and if they have any experience in how micromobility would work in their developments. I suspect they have. And so I'd be interested in hearing what they have to say.
Chair. So I'm glad we had the discussion about meetings because I'm not sure, given how much it touches the edge of my district, but I don't know that 3 meetings. So if we could leave that to the discretion of the council person of the district, that would be wonderful. I am supportive of finding a different vendor for traditional bikes as well, and for the study of expansion into Biltmore District. I too would like to know more about 24-hour operation. And then I want to talk a little bit about the equity zones and my questioning on the utilization rates. But first, are our vendors still with us on the lines? Okay. Could they please tell me their utilization rates for our different equity zones?
Council member, this is Charlie Mastelloni with Lime. I would have to follow up with your office on that specific data. I don't have it in front of me at the moment, but I'm happy to do that today.
Okay, Charlie. And I'd also like to, okay, thank you. Please do that. So what I want to say is that I want equity, or I want the micromobility available in our equity zones. I also want to balance that with, if we're making them put a certain amount there and the utilization is not happening, I wonder if it's not because it's available in the right places. I'm not sure what the problem is.
Right.
But if there's a problem we need to work through, let's work through that. Otherwise, I think that we should allow them the opportunity to offer the right amount and increase it as the utilization rate goes up. So it's not that I want to not have it there, if that makes sense.
Oh,
Go ahead.
Sorry.
Oh, I agree with you. And what I think needs to happen by staff is that they analyze all this data and analyze and come back and say, you know what? In this equity zone, we're only going to leave 3 bikes, I don't know, or 6 bikes, or we're going to leave, we know that in this area, scooters are used more than bikes. But they need to study, as we're hearing this, to say, how are we able to provide some micro-mobility in equity zones and still be a robust program throughout the other areas. So what that is, I don't know. So I agree with you in that sense of we need to look at it.
I just want to add one thing too, because we're talking about equity zones, and I do have in my district as well, and I think we have to be cognizant of its connectivity to other parts of our system. We all know the south central extension of the light rail is not completed, so it's not fair to compare apples to oranges in that context and use that data to then remove those options from that community as well. So I definitely agree that we need to ensure we have further assessment and evaluation of this, but I just don't want it to be purely based on utilization when we are not comparing the same setup in both instances.
And I would agree that given the fact that the light rail is not completed yet, those utilization rates in those areas are going to probably be significantly less. I wouldn't want us to eliminate those areas because of that. I just want to make sure that we're allowing the opportunity for the data to drive how much we have available at a given time. And it should be reevaluated as things change.
But we know that data only reflects what we ask it to. So I just want to make sure that what we're asking the data to do and to reflect includes all of the factors.
Absolutely. So it should include all the factors. It should not just be
usage or the number of,
Right, we need to know the light rail is open here and not open there, and that when it opens here, then we should have a change in how much we have available, because now you're going to have more people that have access, correct?
that's fair. I just want to make sure, because we're focusing on just simply pure utilization, and I don't think that's a fair apples to apples comparison in this context. That's all
Are there
I was
other
saying.
data items that you'd like to see us look at?
Well, one, I think one of the key things I haven't really heard a lot of conversation is why are users in these equity zones not using the light rail? Have we made a concerted effort to find out that information, or are we just guessing and speculating as to why they may or may not be using it? So I think that's part of the evaluation I would like to see is is it simply the temperatures? That could be a drive-in factor. It's easier to get on on an e-scooter and go 2 minutes or 5 minutes down the road, but it may be a different conversation if I'm being asked to take it and go for 10, 15 minutes in the summer. It may just be a issue that we unfortunately don't have the answer to, and I think that's part of the evaluation process I would like to see the department undertake.
Matt?
No, I think that makes sense. I think perhaps we also work with the providers. They may actually have some information to share on those issues as well. I would think from other cities, right, that could help us evaluate.
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, I think we understand the equity discussion needs to include user rates, but also what other factors might be impacting that. And as part of our plan and coming back in September, we can talk about here's what we evaluated and explore any changes to those, but that will be at direction of the subcommittee once we can come back and present some of that information.
So we haven't posted this for a motion, but can you move forward and look at adding those areas, or do you feel like you need to have a motion?
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, I think for the purposes of going forward here, the majority of direction that you guys have provided, we can work on incorporating as we are working on the plan and the outreach and offering each council member, up to 3 meetings,
Okay.
depending on what they would like. I think the one about expanding the boundaries for the 2 miles and then increasing the time are ones that we will have to look at and discuss with the law department, because I'm not entirely sure how those were adopted and defined originally. Was it a motion of council, the subcommittee in January that established them? That would need a full discussion by the council to then make those changes, or was it something that staff had flexibility on? And so we'll have to explore that, and if we can
Okay.
do it, I think you guys seem to be in consensus with that. I think that's okay. If not, then we'll come back to you.
I don't have a problem with it going to council if you do the research and say, yeah, we do need a motion to move it forward. We've had the conversation. I think we could take the action at the entire council, at an entire council meeting.
Okay.
Sorry, Chairwoman?
Yes.
Sorry, there was one other point that Councilwoman Pastor brought up, which was the sidewalk writing, and I would like to get more information back from staff, because there are certain parts of our city where walking, like downtown, we all walk to different places, and some of those sidewalks, I certainly wouldn't want to have to share them with the scooters. However, if I was scootering, I'm going to say near the Biltmore area, where there's very little walking happening and cars are doing 40 to 50 miles per hour on the streets, I would like to understand the viability of us allowing sidewalk riding of micromobility in certain parts of our city, because I think that given our city, that we need to kind of be flexible and nimble in how that occurs. So I would like to see more information on that. I would like to see some of this, though, come back sooner, Chairwoman, if we could, especially about expanding 2 miles along the light rail. And what was the other one? Potentially the expansion of hours if we could.
Okay.
September seems that's 8 miles, or 8 miles, 8 months away. And then if we're doing an RFP and some other stuff, it's a whole nother year before we're making any significant changes to the system. So if we could have some of it come back sooner, that would be wonderful, and do it in chunks, that would be great.
Yes. And I'm fine with that. And I would agree, again, I know in Scottsdale, they do allow scooters and bikes, and I see them up in the Kierland area, and the traffic there is quite different than in downtown Scottsdale, so you're right, we need to analyze that as well. So I am fine with that. Yes, Councilwoman Pastor?
Yes, thank you. As for the Biltmore region, I would like to see staff to work for that council person. Their area, they know their area, so in that sense. In the 24/7, I still want some outreach, so if it comes back sooner, that's fine, but I want outreach on the 24/7. And you can work with each one of our offices in doing that. I think one of the things that I would like to see explored in the future is that in Miami, when I was in Miami, their bikes are branded or have city as their sponsor. And my understanding is that that's one of their sponsors, and that they handle all the micromobility pieces and the funding and everything else that goes through that. So I would like to look at a sponsorship in the future, and in the micromobility world, and maybe government really is to provide the policy and the framework for people to operate in the city, but then that can then be moved out of the city nuances and into a private, kind of a private-public partnership, but that's a future conversation, not today, to be looking at. I understand New York also does that, so.
Madam Chair, Councilman Pastor, can I ask a follow-up question as it relates to this idea about bringing something back sooner for like the hours of operation? If we are talking about the hours of operation as it is in the existing boundaries, or is it okay to expand to the 4 a.m. with that, but not in the expansion areas, and continue to then work on some of the expansion area direction, but then that way you guys are okay with the hours in the existing boundaries? I want to, if you're not, please let us know. I'm just trying to get clarity on what staff should do outside of here.
I'm okay with hours being expanded on the current contract now.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Up to the limits that Councilwoman Pastor said, which I think was 4 a.m.
You said 3 a.m.
3 a.m., sorry.
3 a.m.
3 a.m.
I would like to see the difference. I would like to see a pilot of the 24/7 and see exactly what you're going to capture in the 24/7.
And Madam Chair, Councilwoman Pastor, I think that's what staff was proposing as part of this, is we would do a pilot in the existing boundaries only 24/7 and capture data on that and use that to come back with a plan and make some recommendations on, is that something that should be in expanded areas? Does it only make sense in downtown because of the bars and activities and things we have clustered in an area? Or is that something that makes, sense in larger areas throughout the city? So I think if you're okay, it would be great to have that data as part of a pilot program now and start collecting that so that we can make some more informed decisions as we would come back to you in September on expansion of that.
I'm fine with that. I just want to know what you're capturing. So I want to know because what you'll capture is say, oh, well, yeah, there was more usage, as I heard at a previous meeting, to to expand it. Oh, there's more usage because people are coming out of establishments at 2 o'clock in the morning and are able to use. I want to know also the accidents and the incidents that happen between 12, obviously between 12 and 5, nothing's happening. They're sweeping. That was a good thing. So I want to know, behavior-wise, in 24/7, what does the sweep look like between 1 and 5? And do we have more left?
More of the
Scooters
left.
just thrown everywhere, or however, not in the where it's supposed to be. So the data that we're collecting is going to be very different between the 12 and 5 a.m. But yeah, I'm fine with expand in the area that you want to test, sure.
So we're doing a 24/7 pilot in the current area that we have under contract right now.
Correct. I believe that's what the subcommittee
Okay.
is good with. At least 3 of you have nodded in that direction. And we will come up with what we are proposing to collect from a data perspective and circle around with you guys to let you take a look and give us any other suggestions on what we should collect. So that way, when we come back and report to you, we're able to report on, all the data that we can accurately capture. There may be some things that would be desirable to capture, but we might not be able to, but whatever we can accurately gather, we're happy to do.
I just want to state my position on this. I'm fine with the expansion or the pilot program, but I want to make sure we see 2 things. We provide some additional resources or something that addresses, that's intended to spur usership during the hotter time, so we want to definitely address the heat component of it. And I also think we need to address, we have to have some guidelines that minimize the nuisance or the unpleasant component of when people leave their bikes or leave the scooters in places they're not supposed to. I don't want us to roll out the 24/7 of what we currently see is happening right now. We need to at least address some of the issues that we've heard and make sure they're incorporated into the pilot. And the one thing I apologize I did not hear was, what would be the extended, the term of this pilot? Would it be 6 months, a year? What are we thinking?
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, and Councilman Hodge Washington, I would think until September, when that was the direction so far, to work on putting this stuff together and come back in September. I think the things I would want to find out from the vendors, how quickly they could, get things set up to do all of that, and how quickly we could get the data collection together. So as I'm thinking of this, maybe it would be probably 6 months from when everything could be rolled out, when the vendors could actually do it, when we're set up to collect the data that we would need to. Maybe then it's 6 months of data at that point to do that, as opposed to September deadline that it may take a couple of months to get things up and squared away, and then not have very much time, and that only be a lot of it being the summer.
Thank you.
I think that's probably adequate time. That also gets us through part of the summer as well, and the Final Four. So, thank you. Are there any other comments or questions? All right, well, thank you. Thank you for the presentation.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, if I could, just one other comment I want to make regarding going out for an RFP for a separate bike user. We will work on making that happen. The RFP that was responded to was set up to allow for specific bike ones. What staff had originally envisioned was that we'd have a couple of ones that were focused more on scooters, and then a separate company on bikes, and we did not get any bike respondents. And the cities that are more like ours in terms of less dense, but have some light rail components and those things, they're actually paying for bike service. The industry as a whole is not looking at pedal bikes, as they once were. And so we'll go out and ask again, but without us paying for it or some type of sponsorship, element to it, as Councilwoman Pastor mentioned, it might be difficult to get some respondents, but we're happy to try again and see what we can do. I just want to make that clear that the bike ones that we are aware of are those places are paying for there to be a bike pedal component for the most part. Or they're very dense like New York City that, the density of people there is much more an attractant, and people use those bikes because of how dense it is.
No, but we are like Tempe, Mesa, and Scottsdale. So, right, use best practices. I have a comment back to that. I really appreciate that piece. The reason why I did it is because there's an RFP that we release that says there needs to be traditional bikes. There has been a request. The reason why it was written in the RFP, because people have requested since the RFP to have traditional bikes. There is a reason, or I don't know what the reason is, as to why staff cannot put the traditional bikes out. The vendors don't dictate what the customer is asking. The customer is asking for traditional bikes. We have said several times we do not want the library system. I don't know how much more clearer I need to get into saying we want traditional bikes in the downtown area. So you can go out and do another RFP. I'm just forcing it because the vendors don't want to do what we're asking for. So I would get with the two vendors and say, we want traditional bikes in our downtown area, because that's really where the request is coming from, and then you can do it in the other areas, and we do not want a library system. It's very simple to me.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Council Pastor. We hear you, and it was in our items here as part of the discussion of explore what we can do to have bikes more readily available downtown within that area. I just wanted to put it out there because those other cities are, the difference in some of those cities' RFPs and ours are, we're not paying for the service. They are paying the city, and so that's part of our challenge. But we will go back out and continue to work with them and see what we can do to incorporate them in a much better manner. We completely understand what you are saying and have heard from some of those downtown folks and want to try and make that happen as well.
I think by taking it out too, that'll let us know really if there is that interest or if there is a demand. I think that's part of doing the RFP.
Absolutely, yes.
Thank you.
I have, not on that.
Okay.
I have future items.
Okay. Well, we have now call to public, and with that, the city attorney explains public comment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. During citizen comment, members of the public may address the subcommittee for up to 3 minutes on issues of interest or concern to them. The Arizona Open Meeting Law permits the subcommittee members to listen to the comments, but prohibits members from discussing or acting on the matters presented.
And we have one speaker, Diane Barker. Come on down, Diane. Been waiting patiently.
Good morning, Councilwoman, Chair Stark, and the women subcommittee members. I'm Diane Barker, and I'm in District 7, and I do use a traditional pedal bike, and I've just, to the point, I've had people want to electrify it. They want me to change it. I said, well, if it's not broken, why fix it? So, but I am a person that's an advocate for multimodal transportation, which includes the bicycle. It includes the modes you've talked about, and the car. People are surprised about that. But the reason, and I'm a little early with the Valentine, you know, I wear my heart on my neck, but that's my favorite day, so I want to say something sweet to you, but I do have a disparaging remark, and I would like to have Mario Panaguia staff, Miss O'Brien. I noticed her staff was at the local opening of the Northwest Territory of the extension, and I did go there Saturday. And, you know, I was able to go all the way from downtown up there and then ride my bicycle around and wanted to talk to your staff. But I got a citizen that came over and gave me a hug, so we got into a conversation. I also was attempting to attend. I look at the city council clerk postings, and I was up on Thursday to see your special event. I saw no signs over at the Thelda Williams Center, and I went over to the DoubleTree. And what I experienced was, I believe, wrong. I believe it needs to be corrected. I really should have apology. I have been collecting likes and apologies when I'm outside trying to help people get around, and they, you know, are a little abusive. But what I was kicked out of the DoubleTree Hotel, and I wasn't creating a commotion. I went there because I'm interested. But your city council, these announcements for the Thursday and Saturday are almost commensurate. But one of them says special event, and the other one says notice of a public event. I was told by a woman who is twice my size and bullying and wanted to know where there was any posting. I said, at the clerk's glass. She looked at me and she said, no. She was, you know, my information giving to her immediately was like that. I saw easels where, when I was in the room, there was information. It's saying a quorum was there. And I peered into the big room, and it looked like there's going to be a lot of food and everything. And I said, well, I'm here just to observe. I'm a citizen, and I'm not going to eat. And they had the manager kick me out and actually to the curb.
Thank you. I believe that's all the citizens' comments. So the next is future agenda items. Yes, Councilwoman?
Yes, I would like to do a future agenda item on studied traffic patterns from possibly maybe from 15th or 19th Avenue out to 7th Street, or maybe a little bit further, maybe 16th. Study the traffic patterns around the core area up to, I think, I'm even going into your district, Deb, to discuss the traffic patterns and all the new developments that are going to be arising in there and entering in there, and the impact on the reverse lanes. Spoke to staff about this, so.
Okay, anything else? We are adjourned. Thank you.
Harkins, who still, there's a lot of Harkins theaters around Phoenix and Scottsdale, and he owned it for